Now, chances are, if you're watching this, you're probably a WordPress user like myself. And maybe, like me, you're also a little bit frustrated with the disconnect between the current legacy, as we'll call it, WordPress dashboard, and the full-site editing and Gutenberg experience. The differences in the way that everything looks and feels between those two can cause confusion. So I want to ask a question, and let me have your comments down below and your feedback on what you think. Do you think it's a good idea that WordPress pause all new features for version 6.7 of WordPress and focus on creating a unified dashboard experience to remove that confusion for newer users? So what I'm talking about is basically saying no more new features for the next version, which I believe is 6.7, and focus solely on one key aspect, and that is creating a unified experience in the WordPress dashboard. Now, what I'm talking about is not adding new features into the media library and all those kinds of things. We know this is potentially coming in the near-ish future, and we've seen some videos on this, and it does look very, very cool. But maybe just concentrate on creating that unified experience, changing the styling, the layout, and so on, so it matches with what we see when we go in to edit any of those new templates that we have as part of WordPress. Let me quickly show you what I'm talking about. So this is a standard dashboard when you log into WordPress. We're all pretty much familiar with it. Love it, hate it, whatever you feel about it. It's been there for a while. Now, when we go into Appearance and we come into the editor, we now have a very different experience. The navigation down the left-hand side changes. We've got rounded corners. Everything looks a little bit more polished, a little bit more fresh and modern. So what I'm proposing is we bring this same aesthetic into the standard dashboard. So on the left-hand side, we still have that, in this example, the traditional black and light gray kind of navigation and so on. But this is also on the front end of the dashboard side of things. So we'll have our pages, our posts, our dashboard, media, all those kinds of things. Then when you come into any of these, you have, like I say, that consistent experience. For example, we come into the style section, you can see everything still remains consistent. We can choose any of these options and everything looks the way we expect it to inside here. Come back out of styles, for example, and we'll go into something like pages. And now you see we still have a slightly modified version. We have this new extra panel in the middle, but we have, again, that unified experience. The navigation may have changed on the left-hand side, but it still retains that consistency. The width of the actual panel itself, you can see the main design area still looks exactly the same. All very, very simple, I would say, to probably implement because it's obviously already there. So we're just talking about changing the aesthetics, not adding new functionality in. Now, we already have lots of different plugins and tools and ways in which you can customize the dashboard, but the problem still exists is that it's not keeping the same consistent look and feel. When you come into something that's part of the newer versions of WordPress, full site editing and so on, it then changes into this kind of style. So like I say, it just creates a kind of disconnect between the different parts of WordPress. So that's my question to you. Do you think it would make sense to pause development on new features, still keep bug fixes and so on to make sure that security is a priority, but just concentrate one version of WordPress to bring uniformity to the whole dashboard and create a much more seamless experience? Seasoned designers and developers and people that work inside WordPress every day probably overlook it. And especially if you use things like Bricks Builder and so on, you kind of don't really go into the dashboard of WordPress that much anyway. But when you hand this off to a client, they don't necessarily have that same experience. And I think it adds to a real level of confusion. And people that go, oh, you want to use WordPress? I don't know if I want to actually do that. It's not the greatest experience. And if WordPress wants to continue growing, I think they have to focus some attention on this side of things. But let me have your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'd love to know what you think. Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I talking out of my, you know what I mean? Let me know in the comment section. Anyway, that's all I want to say. All applicable links in the description. My name is Paul C. This is WPTuts. And until next time, take care.